Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator, and I'm also the creator and moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. And today, we're here to talk about Valentine's Day. I know it's 3 or 4 days after, and almost all of the press and attention to Valentine's Day is given to the weeks up to Valentine's Day and on Valentine's Day itself. But I thought it might be interesting to go take a look at the history of Valentine's Day, to do a sort of, retroactive continuity to the history of Valentine's Day, to do a little bit of research into where it comes from, how it came about, the modern day customs of Valentine's Day, and how, in America anyway, we spend our money on Valentine's Day. And so we're in for an hour which is full of resources and references and research into retconning Valentine's Day. I want to remind everybody who is watching today that please go into the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Go into the comments, let us know where you're connecting from, what country you're connecting from, not whether you're connecting from YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, but where you're connecting from. And what I can do is I can do a quick shout out. Everybody, let people know where you're connecting from. And also, if you have questions or comments about Valentine's Day, or the topics or resources or anything that I might be talking about today, just throw them into the comments as well, and I'll get them asked and answered. So before I begin, I want to start off by mentioning, so here we have the homepage of TheChocolateLife.com. It is live. If you're a regular visitor, you may notice there's a change to the way the site looks, and that is that over the course of the last week, what I've done is I've added a fourth post into the top rail. It just gives you a little more flexibility in editorial scheduling. If you go there for the first time, it may look, what's different, and that's what it is that's different in terms of the top rail. And also for every single post, or for every single live stream, I create a post, and here is the post for today's live stream. And on the live stream post, what you'll do is you'll find not only the background, why it is that I'm putting this together, but also to go and put links to the resources that I'm going to be using during the live stream. That way you don't have to worry about copying the URLs. If you want to, if you have room or screen or second screen, you can throw this page up and you can follow along by clicking through the resources with me. And so you can read along with what it is we're talking about, but you don't actually have to look very, very closely at what's doing. You don't have to worry about copying any of the URLs. So this post is live on The Chocolate Life, and I do this for every one of the live streams on The Chocolate Life Live. And then also, if we go to the homepage, there's an archive that you can click through to. And this archive shows every single one of the live streams that has been published, I suppose, is the best way to talk about it, since the beginning, now 14, 15 months ago, November of 2021 is how long I've been doing this. And today's episode is episode 91. So with that, I want to give a quick thank to Mark and Yuri, who are connecting from Denver, Colorado, Blue Spruce, Kittredge, Colorado, which is near Denver, of Blue Spruce Chocolates. So thanks, guys, for joining in and letting me know what's going on today. So what I want to do is I want to talk about Valentine's Day. Where does it come from? And why is that important? Because, here in the United States, we have these folk traditions, for want of a better term. They did grow out of a religious tradition, but today we're not using most of the religious aspect of the holiday. So there is this background. But why are we celebrating? Why are we celebrating Valentine's Day to begin with, and how do we celebrate it? I think was the interesting question to me, and the reason why it occurred to me that this might be fun to do, because on Valentine's Day, I had a very, very quick conversation with my daughter in the morning, a little chat correspondence, texting back and forth. We chat almost daily. And I asked her what she was doing for Valentine's Day, and she said, nothing. It's a Hallmark holiday. And that got me to thinking about Valentine's Day as a holiday and how it's observed and the role of chocolate. How did chocolate come to be, right, when it comes to Valentine's Day? And so that's what we're going to go and do today. So the first thing I did is I went to the Hallmark website. And it turns out that, and this link is on the Chocolate Life, but, and it's an interesting distinction. Hallmark started selling Valentine's Day cards in 1913, but they didn't start producing them until 1916. I'm going to go make this a little bigger for everybody. You don't need to see me. You can go look at this. So Hallmark began selling its own Valentine cards, so designing, producing, and distributing Valentine's cards in 1916, although they had started offering cards a couple of years before then. What's interesting to me about this and thinking about it is 1916 is right in the middle of World War I. Started in 1914, ended in 1918. And I wonder to what extent Valentine's Day became a bright spot, something that people could look at, it's at the end of winter, and this became a way to celebrate something, right, in the middle of wartime, for just a day or two, take our minds off what was happening during the war. But that's the time in the United States when it comes to this being a quote unquote Hallmark holiday, 1916. So it's 106th anniversary, 107th anniversary this year of Valentine's Day and the Hallmark Company. Right. If what we want to do is we want to learn a little bit more about the history of Valentine's Day, one of the places we can go is we can go to Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia is an interesting place to go. They're often, very, very long and very, very detailed. I mean, this is a very long history of Valentine's Day here. And what you'll find is that the editors of this, the people who contributed to this, have their own perspective. But if you go and look at, for example, other histories of Valentine's Day, for example, this one on USA Today, what you'll do is you'll find that there are slight differences in the narrative that get put together. And I think that the differences in the narrative are in part, not that they're taking different stories, but what they're doing is they're providing different emphasis on stories. So in the USA Today article, they're very definitive. This is the story. It turns out that there was this saint whose name was Valentine. He lived in Italy in the late 3rd century, so 270s or thereabout. He was a Christian, which is important to the story, as it turns out. And what he did was he caused somebody who was born blind to no longer be blind as a bet. And the emperor at the time, what he did was he beheaded, he executed. I don't know the beheaded with the way it was done, but he executed both the Roman official and Valentine, and put them to death for doing miracles, essentially. And much later, he was canonized by the church and became a saint. Right? And so that is one of the narratives. There were actually several Saints Valentine over the course of history, but we first find Valentines associated in the history sometime in the middle of towards the end of the 3rd century. And it's not until the 16th century, the early 16th century, sometime in the 1500s, that what we do is we find the first association. So we're going to jump over all of this. And it's a very fascinating reading. What I've done is I've given you just one of the potential explanations for the origin of Valentine's Day. It seems to be one where more sources talk about it, which is why some people may think it's authoritative. But it's just one of several. It's just one of several possibilities for the original origins of Valentine's Day. So we post through and we find that there are numerous martyrs early on who are named Valentine, and we get into the history through the 300s and the 400s and the 500s. But it's not until the early 16th century, so the 1500s, with the author Chaucer, that we find the first definitive connection in literature between Valentine's Day and love and romantic love. This is, we're looking at Old English here, And there is this fabulous translation of this first poem, which is found in a book called The Parliament of Fowls, parliament being a collective noun for birds. So here we have this first representation of where Valentine's Day is connected to romantic love. And from there, the narrative goes, what we'll do is we'll find that this became to be more widespread as other poets and other authors began to pick up this connection and become involved in writing poetry and other things like that to support it. Even Shakespeare got into the act that we'll find we'll find that there was an inspiration into painting, and the idea that Valentine's Day was somehow connected to romantic love is a relatively modern idea. So we can't go back all the way to the original Saint Valentine's martyred in the 270s or thereabouts. We have to come back until the 1500s, right? And I think even for most people, I mean, they may have thought that there is a Saint Valentine somewhere associated with it. Saint Valentine as a personality, because there are several Saints Valentine in church canon, it's hard to identify which one of them might be associated with the modern day holiday. We have to ask ourselves why February 14th. It turns out that there was a pagan holiday called Lupercalis, and it happened between what is now February 13th and February 15th, so in that period. And so there's some thought that one of the Valentines was associated in Roman tradition with this holiday Lupercalis, a pagan holiday. Interesting association for a Christian saint to be associated with a pagan holiday. So, but one of the things we know about history is we rarely have the opportunity to say this is exactly what happened. We can apply the historic method. We can look at sources. We can evaluate each one of them independently and come up with what likely happened. So there are a bunch of narratives, but we don't have any smoking gun in terms of written literature, which says this is exactly how it happened. So we're looking at the slow evolution over 1,200, 1,300 years of a tradition. And we find that in the early 1500s that we get this connection for the first time to romantic love. And it is not until the late 1700s that we find somebody has written a book which provides young men, is the story, with ideas for what to put on their Valentine's Day card. So for at this point, sentimental verses for the young lover unable to compose his own. So by this time, the late 1700s, printers had begun producing a limited number of cards with verses and sketches called mechanical valentines. So paper valentines became so popular in England in the early 19th century, right, that they were assembled in factories. Fancy valentines were made with real lace and ribbons, and paper lace introduced in the mid 1800s. In 1835, there were 60,000 valentines that were sent. Now, a reform of the postal system, so making it easier to put postage on something and send it anonymously, which were introduced in a postal reform of the 1840s, right? We're responsible for taking that 60,000 number in 1835, and then by 1841, that number had grown to 400,000 Valentine's Day, simply because it was now much more convenient to send the Valentine's Day by post, and to send them anonymously. There is a tradition like the Secret Santa of secret Valentines around the world. And what, interestingly enough, I mean, people talk about the internet, and so one of the things that the internet has done is it has supported unusual applications. Nobody thought when the internet was invented that downloading adult content or viewing adult content would be one of the most used uses for the internet, but it turns out that it drove another technology. It drove the adoption of the VHS. It drove the adoption of CD-ROMs. It drove the adoptions of DVDs. And so it's unsurprising to note that with the ability to send Valentines anonymously in the mid 1800s, that in Victorian culture, which was very repressed sexually in many, many ways, we start seeing an explosion of ribald, racy Valentine's cards, because they could be sent to a recipient without with safety, because you were sure that the recipient would not know precisely who sent it. So it's a fabulous time. And I did some research, and what I want to do is I want to show. I mean, there is this bit of research that was done. There's a collection from the Strong National Museum of Play, which is up in Rochester, New York. And it's a history of Valentine's Day cards, or Valentine cards, and just going through and looking at the artwork and all of that kind of stuff. It's just amazing what it is that what's done, and the history of the cards. I found this to be fascinating. There's another great exhibit like this. It's over at the Smithsonian Institution. So again, this page is linked to, excuse me, on the Chocolate Life. And just going through and looking at the rich history of Valentine's cards, stamps associated with love, and things like that, just really, really quite amazing. And just even the fact that, here's an early Valentine, and it's on lace. So it looks like it's handwritten on lace. Just incredibly beautiful, beautiful thing. It's a poem. It's To Mary Henry, from an anonymous author, but really, 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 really quite exquisite when we think about it. Going back to Wikipedia here, right? It's a source. I mean, one of the reasons why it's a good source, and you can tell a good article, because there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of footnotes. So you can go through and take a look, and you can find the sources for things, and you can do your own follow-up on them, which is one of the reasons why I often go to Wikipedia first, or include it in what it is that I'm doing, because if there are lots of resources, lots of links to other sources, it becomes a good starting point to go and just get lost in the weeds. And this is one of the things that I did on this particular live stream. But what's interesting to me here is, when you think about it, is that, right, from here, right, so if we look at the bottom of the page here, all the way up to here, right, what we're doing is this connection with romantic love. What we find here is that there's an enormous amount of attention which is paid to Valentine's Day card traditions, right? And we get to, I think, what most people think is the most important part of Valentine's Day gifting, and we'll get to that a little later, is that one paragraph, right? There's just literally, there's this one paragraph here is all there is to say about the connection of chocolate and Valentine's Day gifting. And what's really, really astonishing to me is that I think it's entirely wrong, right? And I did a little research on it. So what it says is, that in 1868, Cadbury created fancy boxes, right? So a decorated box of chocolates in the shape of a heart for Valentine's Day. That's not wrong. But what we want to do is we want to look and say, well, why have we only got this one sentence or two sentences about the history of chocolate and its association with Valentine's Day? What we want to do is we want to go take a look at Cadbury's contribution here. So I did that research. I went to this story here on the History Channel website about how chocolate became a Valentine's Day staple. And again, there's some research here you can go look at, and there are links to the legendary development of St. Valentine's Day, and all the links are to History Channel articles, I believe. Yes. And so that's interesting. But, right, one of the things they talk about, which is quite interesting to me, is that, so this paragraph here, in which they say that Richard Cadbury, who was running the Cadbury company at the time, right, improved its chocolate making technique, right, so as to extract pure cocoa butter from whole beans, producing a more palatable drinking chocolate than most Britons had ever tasted. This process resulted in extra cocoa butter, Yeah, that's true. Which Cadbury used to produce many more varieties of what was then called eating chocolate. So, not in this article, but in another article, they. So let me also go. If we go to the Smithsonian article, which is originally published about the same time, this was updated in. This was updated in 2021, but was originally published in 2013 on the History Channel. This article on the Smithsonian was published in 2015. So about the same time. What we find is that the Smithsonian also makes the same claim about the history. I mean, it goes back and it talks about Marie Antoinette's connection to chocolate and how the original Valentine's connection is attributed to early Christian martyrs, right? Again, actually, I misspoke. Chaucer wrote in the 1300s, not the 1500s. Right. So, it also points out to this point of Richard Cadbury, right? And Cadbury, they have Cadbury saying that he started decorating heart-shaped boxes in 1861, right? Even though the first heart box might have been 1866, 1868. What they don't mention here, and this is really quite interesting to me, is that the cocoa butter press was first patented in roughly 1818, I think it was, by the Van Houtens. And so this whole process of extracting cocoa butter is not necessarily one that Cadbury is responsible for. So they completely forget, this narrative completely forgets the Van Houten connection. And also the addition of cocoa butter into chocolate, right, is attributed to the Fry family in 1847. So more than a decade before any of this association with Cadbury is remarked. So it's interesting to me in doing the research here and looking at what it is that the stories have to say, is how similar some of the stories are, and how their similarities are about a point of history which appears to be wrong. And it could be, listen, it could be that I'm wrong here. I mean, my understanding from all of the reading that I've done, all the research that I've done, is the dates are 1818, 1847, and Cadbury in the 1860s. And there may be something somewhere which talks about Cadbury doing this work before 1847, right? But just not using it this way until much later. So what that has motivated me to do, and one of the things I'm going to do, and if I find the answers to this, I'll put it on the post, is to get a better idea of the exact timeline associated with the inventions which are talked about here. But what's interesting to me here is that even though today, right, what we think of as the most important aspect of Valentine's Day gifting, and this just could be me because I'm in the chocolate world, and so I think I think about the rest of the world, everything comes from a center of chocolate, right? That there is this connection to Valentine's Day cards and its history, right? Which is given so much attention to detail, and chocolate is not as nearly as much attention to detail, even though, so the timeline of chocolate and the timeline of cards is very, very different. But it's again interesting to me. So culturally, the way people pick these things apart. Now, there's also another history magazine, a History Channel article, which I found to be fascinating. So we tend to think about Valentine's Day cards as expressions of affections, as expressions of love, and expressions of connection. And yet there is an entire tradition of what are called vinegar Valentines. And I didn't know that until I started doing the research on this. A vinegar Valentine, what could be that? People took the opportunity to send Valentines to people expressing their hatred of them, which seems to be counterproductive, the whole idea of Valentine's Day. But I thought was a really, really interesting, counter tradition and counter narrative. And so, I think if you're a chocolate maker, this represents an interesting opportunity for future Valentine's Day products. So we're joined this morning by Chef Jeffrey Gardner with Marsata Chocolate out in Manhattan Beach. And I believe, Jeff, that one of the things you do is that you make bonbons, not just chocolate bars. And so maybe for Valentine's Day next year, there is an entire collection of vinegar-based bonbons. I mean, literal vinegar Valentine's Day, a balsamic vinegar, maybe a red wine vinegar, or something like that, which people could give sort of as a joke or to express displeasure or something. And with a story and a history and a connection to this Victorian tradition, which I think could be a lot of fun. So something to consider that just sort of jumped out at me as I was doing this research. But, why are people giving them? For those not on good terms or wanted to fend off an enemy or unwanted suitor, vinegar valentines were sent. So to my Valentine, this is a bit of text. 'Tis a lemon that I hand you and bid you now skidoo. Because I love another, there is no chance for you. I mean, oh man, it's just, I just find this whole thing fascinating and really, 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 really lovely. And I recommend, this is just a fun little article, but, and this is the challenge, I immediately go to the article about chocolate that they did, where they overlook the Van Houten contribution, they overlook the contribution of the Fry family. And it makes me wonder, I'm not an expert on this, so is there something that they're telling me that they're misrepresenting? I mean, I'm not saying they're deliberately misrepresenting it, but it may be something that they haven't thought of, and so they're pushing a narrative. They have an editorial viewpoint that they're trying to get, and you can only do so much research, and you have a deadline, and you write knowing what it is that you know. So it's fun. I love the idea. I think that we have to take this with a grain of salt. Is the point that I'm making? But it's fun stories. And then a couple of weeks ago, I did a live stream on how I think about research and how I approach sources and what it is that I do. And again, this is part of the mental approach that I have towards these things. You look at more than one source, where more than one source is available. You compare what it is that they say against each other. And then you try to come up with, again, using historical method, you try to come up with what is the most likely thing that happened. And again, because my expertise is in chocolate, I can do that with chocolate. I have a lot of background information that I can test this against. But it's really, really a challenge to do with some things, because I'm not an expert in Valentine's Day cards, for example, or the history of Valentine's Day. And I'm sure there are PhD theses written on the history of Valentine's Day. We have to think about the quality of sources as well. I mean, what's fun about this is it's a listicle. So what they've done is they've gone through and they've created an article, which is a list, which is you can go by state and you can find out. The title is, what are the state's favorite Valentine's Day treats? And this is, quite fascinating because it talks about the tradition of gifting with sweets in various parts of the country, and they're very different. And you have to wonder, how did gummy bears become a favorite Valentine's Day gift in Alabama? I mean, which is gummy bears? I don't know the answer to the question. In Alaska, it's caramel apples. I mean, again, an interesting choice. In Arizona, for some reason, it's very specific. And if this is Google, it probably has to do with search requests around Valentine's Day and gifting for chocolate or a candy. But in Arizona, for some reason this year, it was vegan chocolate, which is really, really specific. Connecticut as well, vegan chocolate. Chocolate-covered strawberries, if we look at the number of different states where a particular specific item is mentioned, it looks like the number one gifted type of chocolate for Valentine's Day is a chocolate-covered pretzel. Gummy bears show up again in Ohio, and Montana for some reason, is also up there in the vegan chocolate realm. It's just astonishing to me where these are. For some reason, Virginia sugar-free candy. Vermont is just chocolate, not specified. Trying to get some idea of the cultural aspects of this Maine vegan chocolate. Chocolate covered strawberries. In Hawaii, it's a heart-shaped donut. I love that idea. Heart-shaped donut. I wonder if it's filled with, if it's a Bavarian donut filled with chocolate cream. And in the District of Columbia, so it's hot cocoa. That's interesting. Not one I would have thought of. And so weaving through these trends. So again, just tying this back to chocolate. So if you are assuming that Google is right, and these are the most searched for terms, right, for Valentine's Day gifting, what I would do is I would look at this list and say, what state am I in? What region am I in? What is the most popular Valentine's Day gift? And that's what I would do. If I'm in Louisiana, right? And so people may know that I recently published an article written by John Malick, who's a contributor to The Chocolate Life, on piety and desire. So Christopher Noble's shop in New Orleans, or as I said, Nolans, and I got a lot of grief for using that spelling, but in New Orleans. That if I were in Louisiana, I would want to make chocolate covered strawberries, because I know that there's a huge market for chocolate covered strawberries. If I was right next door in Mississippi, what I might not do is chocolate covered strawberries is also in Mississippi. That's a good thing. But if I were nearby in another state where, for example, gummy bears were the number one thing, making chocolate covered strawberries might not be the best strategy. So again, if you're looking at this, Mark, you're in Colorado, chocolate covered strawberries. So it says for Valentine's Day next year, what you want to do is you want to take your chocolate and do something with strawberries for Valentine's next year. And Jeffrey, you're in California, chocolate covered strawberries is the number one Valentine's searched for item for Valentine's Day gifting. So again, this link is in the Chocolate Life on the page. So if you go to the Chocolate Life Live, the link to this article on state by state, what's your state favorite Valentine's Day treat, you can go and refer to this, and you can say, oh, right, this is one of the things I should consider making for Valentine's Day for next year. I want to say we're about halfway through. Do a quick reset. You're watching The Chocolate Life Live here on the Chocolate Wire channel, and you're either watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. If you're watching live, go into the chats, comments, wherever you are. Let me know where in the world you're connecting from. And if you have a question about what it is that I'm talking about today, which is retcon of Valentine's Day. And I know that I jumped over this, but what is a retcon? And we'll take the Wikipedia definition for retcon, which I found actually the language of it is what inspired the tone of all of the rest of the post that goes below it. So a retcon, which is short for retroactive continuity, right, is a literary device in which facts in the world of a fictional work, right? And so what we're saying is that the fictional work here and the fictional world here is the narrative around Valentine's Day. So in which the facts, quote unquote facts, right, in the world of a fictional work have been established through the narrative, right? And are adjusted, ignored, supplemented, or contradicted by a subsequently published work which recontextualizes or breaks continuity, right? So if we look at the history, right, which is presented in articles like the one on Valentine's Day on Wikipedia, there's the history, which is on USA Today, history on the History Channel website, history on the Smithsonian website, the history, which is presented there, right? We get to Hallmark, and we get to Cadbury, and there is a break in the story, and we have to go back and look at the history and play with it and create a new narrative which presents our purposes, which is what I think that a company like Hallmark did. It's Cadbury started the tradition in chocolate as well. So recontextualizing the history and making it something that it was, and then changing the story, right, to meet their narrative. And that's the connection I just wanted to make here in terms of retroactive continuity and Valentine's Day and the little rabbit hole of research that it sent me down. And one of the bits of rabbit hole of research was figuring out how much people spend on Valentine's Day for 2023. And I originally put up something which will put up something from another news site. It wasn't as in depth. And I looked at it this morning, so from Cheddar. And I looked at it this morning and said, there are some answers to questions I want to get to. And so I went and started digging more deeply this morning for sources that would give me a better handle on what it is that people spend. So I think that every source that I found on this agrees that Americans were going to spend about $26 billion on Valentine's Day this year. $26 billion, right? And it turns out that if we just take the population of the United States above the age of 18, and I went to Wolfram Alpha and asked that the adult population of the United States, and so they capped it between 18 and 64, the ages of 18 and 64. So if we look at that number, that averages out to about $190, $195 per adult. Now, if you think about these being in couples, right? So we have two adults. It's not just one adult. It's a lot of money. Somewhere between $150 and $350 on average, right, is spent, right, per couple in the United States on Valentine's Day. It'd be a lot of money. Right, hard to tell how many of these people are single. I mean, it's hard to know, but it's a lot of money. So that data comes from the National Retail Federation, and it comes from a company called Proper Insights and Analytics. So yeah, and it turns out that we are happy to be out of the times of COVID. So last year, the average was about $175. This year, it's $192, right? So to trend that, that $14 difference, people are expecting to spend it in non-traditional categories, right? When I think about it. So they're spending extra money. Where are they spending the extra money? They're spending the extra money on friends. They're spending the extra money on coworkers, or their children's classmates, and even Valentine's Day gifts for pets. It is age dependent. Consumers between the ages of 35 to 44 plan to spend $335 a person, which is, man, that's a lot of money. And it turns out that the single most popular gifting category is candy, right? So what I don't have here, and I wish that I had, is that this is the most popular category that people are going to be spending in. And the numbers add up to more than 100% because people are going to spend, are going to buy things in more than one category. So I'm going to buy candy and I'm going to buy cards, or I'm going to buy candy and I'm going to buy cards and flowers. Right, so the numbers here add up to 90, 180, over 200% right here. But what we don't have here is if we can break down, so of this 26.9 billion, how much of that is going to be spent in candy, most of which will be chocolate, some of which will be gummy bears. We don't know what the actual spending is per category. We do, interestingly enough, more women are expected to buy jewelry for themselves as gifts this year, rather than men gifting jewelry, which is an interesting statistic, I think. And by the way, these don't apply to Japan. The whole tradition about Japan in Valentine's Day in Japan is very, very different from the United States. In Japan, It's mostly females gifting males, um, um, for reasons that I should have spent more time looking into the source of. And now that I mentioned, I will go back and look at the source of Japanese Valentine's Day transitions and traditions and put them in a link into the page. But I think that what's interesting here is, and this is why I'd like to know is, what is the average spend on each one of these categories? So 50% of people are expected to buy some sort of candy, but that represents $5, or does it represent on average $50 of the 192? I would be really interested to know what that spend is, especially because dining out or an evening out, right? I don't entirely understand. So an experience, I'm sorry, as opposed to an evening out. So I might go to a play, I might go to a movie. That's part of it. An evening out, I'm going to buy dinner. So it would be interesting to know what the average spend in each one of these categories was, to get an idea for. It would help me, for example, if I'm a chocolate maker, to know that on average, people are going to be spending $23 a person on candy. And so what I might do is I might want to think about how I organize the offerings that I make for Valentine's Day around about what people spend on candy gifts for Valentine's Day. It would make sense. That could be packaging. So does that mean I have 6 strawberries, chocolate covered strawberries? Do I have 9 chocolate covered, 8, 9? I mean, this would help me understand how to think about the presentation that I'm making for the market that I'm in. So, again, if I'm gummy bears, what would I do to put together if the average spend is $25, would I want to put together a $25 gummy bear gift? Maybe. Giant gummy bears in a basket, gummy bears with ribbons around them, with cards attached to them. I mean, there are many ways in which I can take a gummy bear gift and make it something interesting. But having those 2 bits of understanding would help me. I think, if I was a maker, I'd want to know, so I could say, is the pricing of what I'm doing in line with what people are expecting to spend? So I think this is also a really, really interesting statistic. So I could recommend that people look at, is that when you think about the way the chocolate gift you're making, right? When you think about the way your chocolate gift is organized and presented, right? What you might want to do is you might want to think about the kinds of recipients that are the kinds of recipients, the categories, the classes of recipients. And so what you might say that 32% of all people who are doing Valentine's Day gifting gift a pet. And you're saying, I'm a chocolate maker. What could I do, right, that would be suitable for a pet? Dogs, it's hard because dogs and chocolate is real hard. But there might be something that you could do that would be pet friendly. Or it could be packaging that you could put together. But think about who the recipient of the gift is, and think about how that might influence the way you design your recipes, the way you design your packaging, and not just assume that the same kind of packaging is going to appeal to all of your customers. So 87% are going to buy something and gift it to a significant other or spouse, right? And obviously, the packaging associated with that is going to look a little bit different from if you were giving it to a sibling, right? Or you're giving it to an aunt or uncle. So you want to be thinking about that packaging and how you might be able to influence a purchase decision, right? So you want to influence the purchase decision so that somebody will come in and say, listen, I was thinking about buying some chocolate for my wife or my boyfriend or my significant other, whatever that category of significant other is. But, oh man, I see something and the way it's presented makes me think this would be a perfect gift for my uncle or my aunt, right? So think about how the packaging represents different gifting opportunities, right, in this list of gifting. If I want to buy something for a friend, a coworker, a colleague, right? Do you in fact have something that would be suitable for gifting right, to your kids' classmates or to one of your kids' teachers. Again, a packaging, I mean, it could be the same product, right? Right. It's just packaged differently. And so it represents it, and it may be priced differently. So it's not, so it could be a different quantity, for example. So thinking about, thinking about these things give you a strategy for thinking about how to put together products for Valentine's Day, which is, for me, one of the things that, as a consultant, and I talk to people about things, this is gravy for me. It helps me as I want to go and help my consulting clients think about their businesses and what they can do in very, very high traffic holidays, position their business, because there's a lot of Me Tooism. I think I live in an area where I have a Dwayne Reed and a Walgreens and a CVS. And it turns out that a lot of Valentine's Day gifting, from another bit of research, a lot of Valentine's gifting happens at drugstores and convenience stores, not at dedicated chocolate boutiques, right? Interestingly enough. And so if you look at the presentation of the box, the heart-shaped box, or this and then there's a lot of consistency there. And so it becomes very, very difficult to differentiate what it is that you're doing. Certainly price is one. I go to the drugstore because I can get more volume probably than I can get by going to a specialty chocolate shop, but I'm limited in terms of the different kinds of presentation that I can give. So it may be more brand dependent, right? And it may be more value dependent. So more stuff for the same amount of money. So but thinking about this, and doing your homework gives you a really, really interesting idea. So if you're in an area, you should have done this the day before Valentine's Day, but go to all of your local big box stores, go to all of your local drugstores, go to all of your local convenience stores, and find out what their packaging looks like and what they're charging for what, right? And use that to help you figure out what it is that you are going to want to produce for Valentine's Day and sell to people. So, I mean, there's a lot of data in this page, and it may seem overwhelming, but little things like people are spending 35% of people. Again, this goes to more than 100 because people will shop in more than one place, right? But this will tell you where your customers are, right? So they're buying online, they're buying in department stores, they're buying at discount stores. Those are the three major categories of sources. Local small business is 17% of customers purchase, right, from a local small business. So if you're a small chocolate maker, this tells you that you should have a strong online presence as well. You'll find more customers for what it is that you're doing. So thinking about and looking these things through, just really, really fascinating way to understand what's going on. In the consumer side, this is what consumers are looking for, and how do you meet that demand? So rather than just make something, right, and hope that people will buy it, can you figure out what you're going to make and how you're going to present it at a price point and in packaging that is going to give it the greatest opportunity to be selected? And so that's, I think, where this data is really, really interesting to go take a look at. I want to also go and spend just a few minutes. If you're not a chocolate maker here and you're just a lover of chocolate, and what you want to do is you want to gift chocolate to someone, I want to talk about it the other side. And it may turn out that as a chocolate maker or confectioner, this may help you if people walk into your shop. How do you go about talking with them? So originally, I think in 2008 or something like that, I wrote an article for Yahoo Personals. I was asked to write an article, for Yahoo Personals. And I updated it when I copied this over to TheChocolateLife.com, which is how to gift chocolate for Valentine's Day. And what I did was I said, I think that there are a number of different approaches to buying chocolate, and it depends on who the recipient is and your relationship to the recipient. And I just want to say that this photograph is of passion fruit chocolate hearts decorated with red cocoa butter. The hearts were created by Fritz Knipschult, who's a friend of mine, somebody I've known for quite some time. All right, so buying chocolate for someone you know. If you're going to buy chocolate for someone you know, right, what I would do is I would recommend going into a specialty chocolate shop. Now you're going to go into that specialty chocolate shop, excuse me, and what you want to do is chocolate is wonderful because it helps establish emotional connections. You can use it to tell stories in lots of interesting ways. So if you're going into a chocolate shop and buying chocolate for someone you know, I think the point you want to make is that I know you, right? I know what you like, right? And you want to show that you're paying attention and you want to please the recipient, right? Not yourself, right? And so if you're buying chocolate for someone you know, right, and you know that person is not an adventurous eater of other foods. So if they're not big on sushi, they don't do Thai, they're not spicy, their idea of adventurous is, to use cheddar rather than mozzarella on pizza. I mean, we all know people who are very, very picky in their eating habits and who are not adventurous. And so if you are giving chocolate to somebody who is not adventurous, right, what you'd want to do is you'd want to go and choose flavors that you know that they like. So if you know they're a big pecan fan, doing something with pecans is what you want to do. If you know they're a big milk chocolate fan, don't buy them dark chocolate. If you know that they're a big caramel fan, lean into caramel, right? And it could be a flavored caramel, right? That would be interesting, right? But lean into that, right? Lean into showing that you've been paying attention, you know what it is that they like, and you want to connect with them by showing that you know, right, what they like. Right? Now, this could be completely the opposite. You could have someone who's just a real adventurous eater. Their idea of a good night out is to go to a restaurant they've never been to before and eating a style of cuisine that they don't know very well. And so going into a chocolate shop and saying, what's the most adventurous set of flavors that you've got, right, would be a really good approach for that person. Again, the idea here is that you're showing that you've been paying attention and you understand. And this is a significant other of 20 years or the significant other of 20 days or 20 weeks, right? Showing that you're paying attention is the great thing to do, right? One of the reasons why I've got these passion fruit hearts here is that it's hard to go wrong with a passion fruit heart. If you're completely lost and this is for someone you want to get to know but don't know much about them yet, right? And you want to show that your intent is serious, that a passion fruit chocolate heart is not a bad way to go, right? But we've got this. How do you give chocolate to someone you know, right? And focus on what they like, right? And focus on showing, excuse me, there's something outside. Show that there's that you've been paying attention and you understand what it is that they like, right? So how do you give chocolate to people you don't know, right? And again, this is the idea. So this is not to the random person. You don't I would not use this approach for my kids' teachers. I would not use this approach to a sibling, right? So this is an approach for someone I want to get to know better, right? And Valentine's Day is an excuse or a reason, which may be a better way of thinking about it, to be able to establish that connection, establish the sincerity of that connection. So if you don't know the person you're giving the chocolate to, you don't know anything about what their flavor preferences are, you don't know if they're an adventurous eater or a timid eater, you don't know anything about them in that respect, what do you go do, right? And it's very simple. What you do is use the chocolate to tell a story about yourself. You go into a specialty chocolate store, preferably a local one, not an international brand, but if you don't have a local brand and all you have is an international brand, do that. And then go up to the counter and say, I like walnuts and I like rum and I like strawberry. I'm not, I also like, Italian food and vinegar, balsamic vinegar and things like that. Do you have anything in your case which is those flavors, right? And hopefully what you can do is you can maybe get a chance to taste them, but what you're doing when you're doing that is you're picking flavors that tell a story about yourself, right? So that you're using the gift of chocolate, right, to convey information about who you, the gifter is, right, to the giftee, the recipient, right? So you can say, listen, I chose this piece of chocolate because I was in the store, and when I was talking about it with the person behind the counter, it reminded me of the chocolate that I used to love as a kid, right? And so this flavor, takes me back to my childhood. And that's, if you can, a 4-piece box in which each box, and you don't need to do this with a huge box. I mean, going into a store and buying a pre-pack box, so here's a 1-pound box, 454 grams for people who are in the metric system. Here's a box, and it came in a box that was already wrapped. It was a selection that was predetermined by someone else. I have no idea what's in the box, right? So I'm giving you a gift, which is, in Forrest Gump terms, you never know what you're going to get, right? Is not the good, in my opinion, is not the good way to think about gifting around Valentine's Day. If you're going to be gifting, you want to recognize the person that you're gifting to, or what you want to do is you want to be able to tell stories about yourself. This chocolate is meaningful to me. I'm sharing this with you because I want to tell a story about myself. And it turns out, it's not actually all that vulnerable in a way, right? So it's a great way to think about gifting, and I don't think it's a way that people think about enough. Again, still don't know what to gift. Passion fruit chocolate hearts, if is a great thing to do. But I wanted to share this with people because I don't know that enough people really think through, or I don't think, well, right, enough. That's a judgment. I think that there's a really interesting way to use chocolate to gift that is often overlooked, right? And that is, if you're in a place where there aren't little chocolate boutiques and all you have is boxed assortments, it becomes you can't do this locally. You have to do it online. And if you're doing it online, how do I know which one of these pieces is going to be exactly what it is that I want if the person I'm buying from or the company that I'm buying from enables me to give a particular assortment? So really interesting questions about that. But I just wanted to be able to let people know that here are some really interesting bits of history about Valentine's Day itself, about Valentine's Day cards, about how chocolate became a part of the Valentine's Day tradition, and how we can use information about Valentine's Day spending habits, if you're a maker of chocolate, to rethink how you position your products to your customers next year by paying attention to what state you're in, very specifically. What are people looking for when they go online and do searches? What are they looking for? You can say, well, if I'm in one state, that does chocolate covered strawberries. If I don't have chocolate covered strawberries, I'm missing an opportunity, right? Right. And if you're in a place that's got gummy bears and you're not doing something with, chocolate dipped gummy bears, then you're missing an opportunity. So think about these things very, very strategically, and then think about who the recipient is, and can you create packaging that will attract the buyer of the buyer of the product, and to think about exactly who they're giving it to, so that they can make the connection that way as well. Right? And believe it or not, that's the hour. We're at the end. I had a bunch of other things that I wanted to talk about. What I will do is I'll push these off to Sunday. So Sunday, for people who may not know, is my monthly members Ask Me Anything call. It starts at 11 o'clock on the East Coast and runs to 12:30. If you are a premium member, which means you have a paid subscription, what you can do is you can email me questions in advance, and that gives me a chance to think about them and compose answers. But if you're not, you don't have time between now and then, just show up. If you are a member, so if you're not a member, and I'm not logged in on this page, if I click on this, what you'll do is you'll find, This post is for subscribers only. So if you're not a member of the Chocolate Life, you'd like to become a part of the monthly AMA call, what you can do is click on either the join button here or the join button down there. There's always a free membership level. If you become a free member, then you can get the details for Sunday's call. They'll be open to you. I don't do Patreon, I don't do advertising. So if you'd like to support the work I do, there are a number of paid memberships. The top tiers of paid memberships here all come with consulting hours. So if you'd like coaching or consulting, they're a part of your membership. This helps me, right? And it helps everybody who is a member of the Chocolate Life. So I want to really to point out what it is that's happening on Sunday and some of the things that we're going to be talking about on Sunday, even if, in addition to whatever questions people might have. Number one is I wrote an article for International Confectionery about qualified health claims for high cocoa flavanol content, cocoa powder and chocolate. So Barry Callebaut just recently got a qualified health claim approved. But what does the qualified health claim mean? And then we're also going to be taking a look, just make fun. I have a TikTok channel, and it's a little slow to load for some reason. But I wanted to show you one of the ASMR videos that I posted on making muchines when I was in Ecuador in October, and it's just taking a little long to load. I'm sorry that the page. Oh, there we go. So here is my TikTok page. Not a whole lot there now, but looking to get support for it. Oop, something went wrong. I wonder what it was. In any event, so that's that. And then also for people who may not be aware, over on Facebook, especially if you're in Latin America, I run a Facebook group called Salones del Cacao y Chocolate. There are over 9,000 members. Most of the members are in Peru and Ecuador, places in Latin America. And so if you go over, if you go over to Facebook and you are interested in becoming a member of the group, you do have to sign up in order to be able to participate. It's an open group, but you do have to join. There are lots of videos around classes, and almost everything that gets posted have to do with something going on in Latin America. So if you're in that part of the world, click and join the website. I have to show you logged in, so you're seeing some of the admin interface. I've got some work to do today. And with that, what I want to do is say thank you to everybody who is a part of today's stream. Appreciate your being here. If you can, like the video, share it with others, subscribe to the Chocolate Wire channel on YouTube, help get this spread to other people. And everybody, listen, I hope that this will make your next Valentine's Day a more interesting Valentine's Day for you, the people that you're gifting chocolate to, the people that you're making chocolate for. But in all cases, remember, right? If you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong, right? Ciao, everyone. Until Tuesday.